Hello, welcome to the meeting 10, an ongoing series on the work of Stan Tenen. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our usual cast of characters: Daniel Gill, Lavana Tenen, Michael Andron, who is coming to us from Israel, and so we may have a little bit of a delay. We may even lose him. He's not doesn't have the greatest internet connection,
I
but
do
we're glad
not.
to have him. There's also a delay, so his speech and his mouth moving may not sync, but that's the reason. But we're glad to have him here. And of course, Adele Packer. Always glad to see you. So today we're going to continue where we started last time in looking at Stan's graphic work, specifically posters that he created over the years. And we're going to do our best to dissect what's on these posters. We're going to look at one specific one, maybe we'll get to a couple. And what we're looking at is basically the mind of Stan Tenen and how he was able to express his ideas and thoughts and theories in a graphic way using words and pictures. We look at these posters as static, but they are not static. They represent movement. At some point, perhaps we'll be able to animate them and see that more clearly. So today, we're going to look at a poster that Stan did. Let's put it up. Do you have an idea when this one was created, Lavana?
Well, it's a composite of a whole lot of ideas, but the last time he worked on it, this was finalized in July 2019.
Okay, so not that long ago. The two golden rules in geometric metaphor. As any of you who have followed this or seen the book, Stan came to the realization that everything could be based on the golden rule, and that this theory is based on the two golden rules, as he called it, as above, so below, and the wheel of karma. And he was able to express this in geometric form. This poster is more dialogue than graphic. That's why we chose it. And by the way, I should let you folks know that this is not an easy task for us. This one isn't so bad, but as we go through Stan's work and try to dissect it, we're not mathematicians. It's a challenge. So we're looking at this as an exploration for us as well as for you. So let's take a look. As I said, there are two golden rules. Now, is there a precedent in this in Jewish tradition in terms of the golden rule? I mean, what information do we have concerning what is called the golden rule? We know about Rabbi Hillel. Maybe somebody would like to talk about the golden rule from that perspective.
I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure everyone has something to say, but in terms of the golden rule, we have two parts to the Torah, really. We have the Torah that's written down, which is called the Torah Shebichtav, the Torah that was written down, and the Torah Shebal Peh, the Torah or the teaching of the oral tradition. So we have the biblical tradition and the oral tradition. They intertwine in some ways. The roots of what texts were accepted as part of the biblical canon have to do with rabbinic legislation, and that's a whole interesting thing. But basically, they're two separate things in a way, although they of course intertwine. And much of the oral tradition is actually, almost all of it, is commentary on the biblical tradition and like how do we understand this and not taking it literally. And but they are considered at the same time two separate kind of branches. And the oral tradition was really started by Rabbi Akiva, which is, I think, the 12th, the second century of the Common Era, and the early 100s, somewhere around there. And everything we have from the rabbis, because there was a lot of destruction after the destruction of the Second Temple, everything we have, everything from the Kabbalah to the Mishnah, and then after you have the Kabbalah, and then you have the Mishnah, which is these older compact teachings, and the Tosefta, and all the different older rabbinic kind of compact teachings about how to understand the biblical, the narrative, or not even the narrative, but the core of the Bible, or the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, and that all comes through Rabbi Akiva. He taught it to he had 5 students who survived, and they all got different parts of that from him. So quite literally, the entirety of rabbinic teachings would not exist without Rabbi Akiva. He's the foundation. You could say he's the Moses of rabbinics. And his famous statement was, you should love your neighbor as yourself. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha is the great principle, the great idea of the Torah. Zeklal gadol b'Torah, the main idea of the Torah. And quite simply put, he really meant that, meaning, there's a lot there, thousands and thousands of pages, and then thousands of pages on those pages, and et cetera, for 2,000 years approximately. But all of it, according to him, is worth nothing if you don't love your fellow. Then it's all meaningless. It doesn't. So that's kind of where that comes from, And obviously Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the elder, put it in the negative earlier, but Rabbi Akiva puts it in the affirmative, which is how the biblical narrative, the biblical verse describes it. And he said, this is it. That's the basic concept. And again, if we should be loving each other. And if we're not, then we're not, no matter how observant a person is or religious a person is, they haven't done anything, actually. So it's the main idea.
Right. And so Rabbi Hillel's version was, don't do to others as you would not have them do to you, or
what's hateful to you, don't do to your friend.
Others. And then the Christian version is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Right. That's the commonly known. Michael, you had a comment?
You're muted.
You're muted, Michael.
Sorry. A few of my teachers pointed out quite often that putting it in the negative is more comprehensive than putting it in the positive, because that which is hateful to you, don't do unto others, doesn't necessarily say that you love your neighbor who plays loud music all night and knocks over your garbage cans. You don't have to love him, but if it's hateful to you if something is hateful to you, don't do it to the other guy.
Right.
And by putting it in the negative, there's a comprehensive inclusion of things that are not included in the simple love your neighbor as yourself. My teacher growing up, my rabbi, said it would be a good idea to put a comma after the second word. Love your neighbor, comma, because he's you. He's the same as you. And that kind of stuck pretty hard too. But what follows in Hillel's statement is equally important. All the rest of the Torah is commentary. And then the third part, which everybody seems to leave out most of the time, is Zilgmor. Now, go study, go learn, go improve yourself and improve your character, and you will naturally move toward that state of loving a neighbor simply by continuing to learn. Don't simply say, okay, I'm doing this, and there's nothing else to learn.
So what he's saying is, don't just use your heart, use your mind as well. A combination of both. Yes, Levon.
Yeah, I will add to what Michael said, that the golden rule, Hillel's golden rule, that was, from Stan's point of view, also the most powerful way of expressing this concept, this direction. And I can speak of two reasons. One of which occurs to me, which is very simply that if you're saying what is hateful to you, don't do to others. What is hateful to me, don't do to others, at least sits me in a generous position. I am aware of what's hateful to me, and at the very least, I'm not going to get that hateful energy in me by doing the same thing to somebody else that I wouldn't want them. I'm not expressing this right, but it's at the very least a healing, flashing red sign to me that be aware of what I really dislike. Be aware of the energy of something that happens to me if I dislike it. Don't put that energy directed at somebody else. That at the very least is what this can do.
Okay.
That the idea is that this goes back to Arthur Young, that the very first statement of personal volition on the part of an entity is saying, no, I don't want that. When you start becoming aware of that. That is in the construction of the poster, we're dealing with the inverted T, we're dealing with the idea of the wheel of karma and the introduction of novelty. Another way of viewing his point of view as to what the vertical direction, let's just call it that for now. And if you think about the wheel of karma, the reciprocity, the cycle of time, what goes around, that comes around, there's no novelty in that. There's no free choice. There's no sense that something different that you had never conceived of can happen. That's the introduction of novelty that happens when you say no to that automatic reaction. It says it leaves a space for something you couldn't, that you couldn't consciously think of that could be good to happen instead. And that was a very important concept. And he's talking about in the top of this poster, the two sides of this poster, the wheel of karma, what goes around comes around, tit for tat, action and reaction, life forces that are cyclical. And on the other side, let's skip the glass blower for the moment, but don't do what's hateful to you. As he says it right there, no expresses volition. It's not imposed from outside. Don't seek vengeance. Don't react if someone does something to you. And that's the interplay of these two forces was part of the basis of the way he parsed his observations of the world in general and of this material that we're studying in particular. And there's a whole lot more to say about it, but I'll leave it there for now and let somebody else pick it up.
Well, let's go to the top and start here in the center where he's got the letter bait. As we've talked about before, and even in the beginning, he said bait is going to be crucial to understanding this work because it is the first distinction. It's the distinction between inside and outside, and that keeps coming up everywhere with Stan's work. So here he's giving that as an example also. So he starts it out with that complementarity and complementarity and
complementarity and reciprocity. Two common words from him.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I want to add one more thing, just to relate this in very general way to the traditional point of view of these two aspects of life, that when he starts bringing in the two names of God that he's focusing on, the four-letter name, the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, and the five-letter name, which we say Elohim. Traditionally, he's associating the five-letter name with the wheel of karma. Traditionally, it's associated with judgment, din. The four-letter name is associated with mercy, chesed. And that, if you think about it, if you're living in a world where everything is cyclic, everything is determined, that's judgment. That's literally, what goes around comes around. The introduction of novelty, it can be analogized to, somebody saying, yeah, well, maybe that's so, but you deserve mercy. And that is worth a whole lot of thought, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. He's also looking at the difference between cyclic time and linear time.
Mhm.
Another way of looking at that perhaps is cyclic time being kind of three-dimensional time, looking at the clock, being bound by the calendar. The clock is pretty much how we live, whereas linear time is always in the present. It's kind of an Eastern idea, always in the now, always in the present, which is an internal clock, whereas cyclic time is the external clock that we live in a three-dimensional world. And so he's got that linear time as progressive and evolutionary, and cyclic time, what goes around comes around. Anybody else have any thoughts on what we're looking at here? You can go anywhere in the poster at this point. We can.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. Some of what has been said is shed new light on the golden rule and making connection to what goes around comes around. They just seemed so different, but now they don't seem different. So when you think about what is hateful to you, what Lavana was saying, like just the act of doing something hateful, even thinking about it, is toxic to us and to the person who is doing that. So it becomes a generous act to yourself to not do what is hateful to someone else, and to see that for every behavior, there are reactions and there are consequences, and that it can come back to you, which is you could say it's selfish, you could say it's generous, but you could also say it's real. It's what really happens, that kindness perpetuates itself, and hatefulness also perpetuates and brings toxicity to the world and to yourself. So I just see that wheel of fortune, or that idea of what goes around comes around, as a closer relationship now to the golden rule than I had seen it before. Then I had another thought about the no, about stopping, or stopping before you start. These are concepts that are really strong in the Alexander technique that I'm well based in. It's sort of a somatic study that I've been involved in for years. And one of the ideas is to break habit, to break a reaction, you have to stop, even for a very short second, a nanosecond, to inhibit your reaction in order to see what the possibilities are. Yeah. And then all the possibilities open up. And I remember when I read Stan's book, I was writing in the corner, so like the principles of the Alexander technique, I have to ask him about that. And when I did meet Stan, we talked about how he had made this idea so important, this idea of inhibiting reaction. It's really also very close to equanimity, this sort of unbounded quality of the heart that's talked about in Buddhism. I've been reading Kabbalah history, and the idea of equanimity goes all the way back to the earliest Kabbalists. Talked about this concept of, it goes with humility, it goes with staying with yourself, not exploding out into reaction, but whether you're complimented or whether you're criticized, to stay with your center and take it in as a learning. And it's the same. Our bodies don't have to overreact to criticism. So I just see all of that in this poster and in the ideas we've been talking about, that the golden rule is much broader and has so much learning it to how to be a good person. It requires a lot of inhibition and waiting and staying back, saying no. Yeah. Someone else.
Stanley would thank you for that.
When I first saw this idea, it really opened up just the concept of the wheel of karma. Although I'm not sure why it would be called a golden rule, because the more you read here, it comes off as pretty negative. If you look down here where he's talking about Yitzir Hara, Ra means to run after what one sees. Ra is the name of the Egyptian sun god. Circling the sun is necessary for physical life, but destructive of spiritual life. But I think he's pointing out that it's probably a balance, because we do live in the physical world and we are faced with challenges. But you basically, and it's a reality, so you can't deny it. We have to accept that that's where it is. The point being, though, is if you're aware of it, you have the opportunity to break it, to break away from the wheel. And the way to do that is to be on the other side, to be aware of the spiritual aspect of it. And then we talk about that a lot here in terms of raising consciousness, and lowering ego, because I think that has a lot to do with this also. This idea that he's presenting here, balance. And you guys are all teachers of balance, when you think about it, it's finding that center, between the two elements. You don't want to be too far on one side, and you don't want to be too far on the other side. You're too far on the one side, you're dead. On the other side, you're evil. So you want to kind of be, kind of in the center there.
I think Michael has something to say too.
Yeah, Michael, sure.
There were two thoughts. One, just referencing something one of you said before. There's an idea that the things that we get most angry about, and anger is certainly one of the things, to take that moment that Adele was talking about and just see what you're doing. But usually the things that get us angry about somebody else are things that we do ourselves. We're impatient with someone, we just don't like somebody, and we discover that, that's exactly what we do, which is why it upsets us when we have somebody doing it to us. And so it becomes a wonderful process of introspection and personal inner work on us, not just trying to fix the other guy. From an educational point of view, there was a trigger film, which is usually a short film. And when I say film, I realize everything is a video now, but this I saw in a film. And it really gets young people, kids, to get an image of God and to get an image of the Ahavta l'Orecha Kamocha. It shows two little really cheap looking puppets, not fancy Muppets, but just two little things, kind of like what Mr. Rogers would use, and just do a voice, and the hands could move and the head could go up and down. And there's a line down the middle, which is a fence. and two houses painted in the back. And one neighbor does something. There's two neighbors. They're there, and those are the two puppets. And one says something to this one, and then he gets angry back. So this one picks up a stick like a Punch and Judy show and whacks the other puppet. And as he hits him, this puppet reacts, but the one who did the hitting also goes, ah. And he picks up the stick again and he goes, bang, and he goes, ah. And then the second one says, ah, now I got him. So he picks up his stick and he starts in. The same thing happens as he's hitting the other guy. He's reacting to the pain. And then the camera pulls back. And you see the puppeteer in his two hands, one on each puppet. And so when he's hitting the hang, it's hurting his hand, his own hand. It's as if God is that master puppeteer. I wish I could show it to you because it would already be over, but it's enough to make the point that when you're hitting the other guy, you're hitting yourself because you're all joined, you're all connected. And it's just such a, I remember the first time that I saw it and I was already teaching classes and I went, oh my God, what a fantastic way to talk about God and to talk about who we are and judging what it is that hurts us, why we're hurt, and are we in fact being super critical of the other guy?
Right, very cool. I wanted to point out the graphic here in the center. There's also another one up here. So this comes up a lot in Stan's work, this particular visual. If you look at some of the other posters, you'll see this form, a horizontal line and a vertical line. He calls it the inverted T. Now, in this poster, we're seeing it in a dimension up with the wheel, with a circle. And you could go up dimensions as with much of Stan's work. And we've talked about that. It's very multidimensional. You see it from many perspectives. But here he's using it to show the wheel. Elohim, all the whole, and what Levana was talking about before, that the two sides of what he calls free will and no free will, the law of karma and as above, obviously as above, so below. That's, I mean, that's very literal right there. And then here it is again, talking about time. So this idea, it's amazing that somebody could take two lines and create a set of theories based on two simple lines. So it's up to us to look at that and kind of expand our minds around two lines. And hopefully we'll be able to delve more into the inverted T on future episodes. I think this is a good way to actually start looking at that. Not starting from the one-dimensional, but the two-dimensional perspective of the inverted T. Again, we're delving into a thought process that none of us would have ever gone. Yes, Adele.
Yeah, that image of the inverted T was another image that in reading Stan's book, it immediately was embodied, that I saw my spine and feet on the floor and uprightness, the kind of lengthening that we talk about again in the work that I've done in Alexander technique, and simultaneously this idea of expanding into width, which felt like the line at the bottom that was eventually, the circle was drawn around that line, which really indicates all the dimensions of widening. And then you have this uprightness. And again, it's about balance, because if you have only uprightness, you just keep going up and up and up, and pretty soon your back feels all narrowed and you're tense. But if you release into widening and you forget about the up, you just keep collapsing and sinking and losing a sense of stature and who you are. So you are lengthening only at the pace that you are also widening. And whether you take the image into the body that way, or you take it into the balance of other aspects of life, that when we lose one of the dimensions, we get our crazy world that goes into extremes, that doesn't have the balance of the other perspective. It's really brilliant that two lines can just have so much to say. And then to say as above, so below, and then to go into the golden rule and to see all of the things we've already discussed are in those two lines. Apparently, I think it was in the book, he started thinking about as above, so below with two parallel lines, like an equal sign. And it didn't seem to mean enough to him, these floating lines.
That's right.
Maybe Levana will expound on this, but when he switched the two equal lines to up and out, it suddenly had a symbol that had more possibilities and more meaning.
Yeah, that is pretty much true. He never really related to, he sort of felt that most people thought of as above, so below as like a direct reflection. And I'm trying to think whether actually the math came first, and it may have, because there were things which led him to led him to a particular triangular shape that we have not gone into with any depth so far, and coordinating that with passages in traditional commentaries, traditional sources that seem to have a mathematical relationship. But basically, I think for him, the math came first, and then he realized as he was pulling apart the math that caused him to create, yeah, Bill, that's the right poster, that caused him to create and deal with this particular triangle, the one that's in blue below. He realized that metaphorically it could express in a very compact way a whole lot of ideas, starting with, again, the difference between the wheel of karma and just so you know, for him, that horizontal line is what he called a one circle. Basically, it's if you were looking at a circle, but you're looking at it on edge, well, all you're going to see is the line. It's a one circle. So it was always a circle to him. And then you tip it a little bit and you can see that it's circular, as in the other drawing. Anyway, seeing how that could represent the wheel of karma and also express the idea of, as we were talking about, the introduction of novelty. But for him, the math came first. And I wish I could say it myself any clearer than that, but
well, Stan,
he was the math guy,
yeah,
not me.
Stan actually covered this in one of the videos that we did. That's on our meruvideo.com. It's there's 3 videos that are accompany the book. I think it was the second one where he got into this. And what he explained was he was looking, first he talks about using the scientific message at the beginning. Then he gets into this and says he was looking at these 2 lines as representative, but they just weren't providing him with what he was looking for. And then he decided to go this route. He says it much better on the video, so you definitely should watch it. He also explains about this hermetic drawing down below. And yeah, and then he said he came to this this idea of the inverted T, and then tried everything he could to disprove it.
Mhm.
Anything. He just said, you know, come on. And what happened was every time he came up with a new idea, there it was.
Yeah.
So
That was his way,
Yeah.
find an
scientific
idea
method.
and then see if it was easy to disprove it.
Right.
And that was his understanding of and his expression of the scientific method. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to just add one thing, which is that not only is there the balance between the up and the out that I was describing that you can kind of sense bodily, but there's also the idea of the one and the many. And so the description so often of our God concept, is God is one, and yet we'll say Elohim, or we'll say something in plural, or we'll have a sense that it's about all that is. And it creates that balance in our mind that it is in fact one, all that is in fact one, and that we can balance these really tough concepts with that simple drawing.
And one other thing, again, just to slip into the math just a little bit, or at least the geometric visualization, and we may get to a series of drawings that he made. If you go up a dimension in dealing with this figure, what you notice is that the horizontal line, or the 1 circle, or the 2 circle, or the 3 circle, the sphere, or the 4 circle, hypersphere, gets more and more and more intricate. But that vertical line, there's always only one. Period, end of story. There's just only one. And I'm sure the math for that is on one of his papers. I can't reproduce it in my brain right now, but that's the way it is.
It's an interesting thing, the novelty of Judaism is, there are plenty of religions in the world. Most people actually agree on what is good and what is bad, just from a moral perspective. I mean, there are many, many gradations of morality and ethics, and of course, it's a huge field. But in a certain way, there's a lot of agreement amongst religions, and one of the dichotomies typically is there's the spiritual and there's the physical, and the spiritual is good and the physical is kind of bad, right? But one of the things to remember about that poster specifically is that that's the Shema, right?
Yeah.
So it's misleading to think that he's saying one is good and one is bad. What he's pointing out is this is a oneness, and the job, the things that we do in according to our traditions and according to the kind of spirituality of Judaism, for lack of a better term, isn't entirely withholding from things that are physical. It's in putting them in a context that you can achieve through the physical an elevation, right? So we're not into fasting. We basically have 1 day a year, we added on another, which is appropriate, and then there's some rabbinic fasts, but it's not recommended. As a matter of fact, the rabbis teach that someone who fasts is considered a sinner because they're withholding from God's world, right? So we're supposed to partake in the world. The question is, how do you do that, and in what context? Does it uplift the physical world? Does it reveal what's coming from above in this cyclical time? So we have the calendar, and so it's you could say, well, I mean, whatever, in a couple of weeks it's going to be Passover, and it's going to be really just a Thursday. It was a Thursday last April also, but then we've got this aspect of time where it's that aspect of time all of a sudden opens up the aspect of this elevation. Right, so the physical and the spiritual, really are one, and I think that's the Shema. And it's important to remember that it is important to look at these things are bad and these are good, and we should, of course, all of us try to do the best job we can. But if you look at Jewish history, it's it's far from perfect. I mean, it's one of the ways you can tell that it's not propaganda, the Jewish
Yeah,
Bible. It's
sure.
because like, like, wow, you guys not such a great advertisement,
We
like
really screwed up.
we really
Yeah.
screw up, and we continue to, most likely, but we have, what's beautiful about it is there are these moments of oneness, these unbelievable, extraordinary moments where there's this unity that's just unbelievable that happens. And then we go on and we make mistakes and we do stuff, and so yeah.
Well, putting together what you just said and what Levana said before, when you look at the Shema, it's Hashem, Yud He Vav He, and Elohim, one representing inside, one ready outside, according to Stan, equals one. I mean, really, God is not God. Hashem, it's Echad, which is really the reality. So, just wanted to see if anybody had any final comments on this particular poster. Anything you see in there that stands out? There's Plato's statement at the bottom, which I'll put up on the screen. And interesting, why does Stan referencing Plato?
Because he happened to come across this quotation. This is Proclus, who was quoting, who was, I think, 3rd century of the Common Era, but I'm not sure, who was quoting Plato in his Timaeus. And what he noticed was, here is a case of some classical philosophy observing the same kind of inside-outside dichotomy / unity. Things have a twofold nature, basically, that the one invisible, unique, simple, and unworldly, and Stanley was equating that to the vertical line, and the other visible, multiple, varied, and distributed throughout the world. Well, that's that's the world of nature. That's what he's calling the cycle, the wheel of karma. And then Proclus goes on, there are 2 kinds of energy, the one primordial, immovable, and intellectual. The translation, I don't know what word is being translated as intellectual, and this is like 2 layers removed anyway, but but it's basically one primordial, the other secondary, kinetic, and revolving in relation with the intellect. Well, there you have your cycle. The one is free from cause and effect. I think that was the one that really got him, because of course, what we're positing is that this transcendent, the thing which introduces novelty to our world, free from cause and effect. You go back to the beginning of Genesis, think about creation, think about how that happened, just think about it. And the other contains cause and effect. Well, there's your wheel of karma for you. So that particular quote that he came across really grabbed him. We couldn't really take it further because neither one of us is a Greek scholar. But, there it is. And it would be interesting if somebody wanted to explore that who could understand the original.
It makes me think about Stan's process in doing this. Now, we know that he spent 10 years studying everything, which had to be also Greek philosophy, I'm sure was part of that study. But now we're talking about 20 something where he created these ideas. And is he recalling stuff that he remembered, or is he for some reason going through Greek philosophy to come up with this quote and apply it to this poster?
This particular quote was a chapter heading on a book that a friend of a friend sent to him to review.
Got it.
And of everything that was in that book, this is what caught his attention.
Got it. Okay.
It just came into his lap.
Yeah, because when you look through the book, The Alphabet That Changed the World, and the references that come up, and they're all over the place from all different fields of endeavor, and you just think, so he has an idea and then he starts researching it and he's going through different sources to prove his point or to accelerate his point.
A lot of the Greek, any Greek or classical references that are in our book actually were contributions in a large part from our editor, Charles Stein, who is a classical scholar among many, many other attributes. But, he has professionally published translations of the Odyssey, for example, books on Eleusis. And what was fascinating about working with this man, who was so erudite in his own areas of expertise, was how well it blended with the sense of how things work, of how the world is put together, that Stanley had gotten from his work in increasingly delving into Jewish traditional sources as well as his math. And so that just the process of producing the book with this excellent, excellent scholar was a very exciting process in and of itself.
I'll bet. Yeah. I mean, look at this. One more time, look at this poster and look at all the different references that from different fields of science, of math, of Judaica, that are contained, philosophy, on one page. And that's what's amazing about this. And I challenge you to find another research author or whatever that does this, that combines all these different things in one to illustrate one singular idea that is so basic to all of us. You guys have all pointed that out. This is not, advanced knowledge. This is the basis of our civilization and our thinking, and our humanity. And it's all there on one page. Anybody else as amazed as I am on this?
I always was amazed.
So we'll see you next time. We're going to continue with this path that we're on and examining Stan's visual perspective of his work. So until then, we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.